Hi there. This is episode 2 on carbohydrates. Now, I have a bit of a cold at the minute, so apologies if I'm sniffling and coughing through this presentation. I'm going to try and keep it under the 10 minutes. So, the reasons for eating carbohydrates: if you have a very active lifestyle, carbohydrates are pretty essential, unless you train yourself to burn ketones. But for very active people, carbohydrates are a ready source of fuel. They're easily absorbed and used by the muscles, putting the body under no stress at all. Most of my clients don't have an active lifestyle, so going low on the carb is a really good idea. Secondly, there's a chain of carbohydrates that sits on the top of all cells and they signal to other cells. So they play a signaling role in the body as well. The third and the fourth one go together. Within carbohydrate foods, especially the whole grain foods, there's a certain percentage of fibre. And that fibre, we can't break it down. Our gut bacteria feed on it, and also that fibre moves through our bowel and clears us. So take a look here, short little video. You can see the stomach there behind the liver. So you eat food, goes into the stomach, digestion starts. Then look at the small bowel, that's where a lot of the absorption takes place. But fibre is not absorbed. It goes into the large intestine and it travels through and out of the body like this. Now, a healthy type would be a type 3 or 4. But if you have a type 1 or 2 or a 5, 6, 7, it's important to review the dietary content of fibre from day to day. In the small bowel, that's where the bulk of the absorption of the likes of glucose takes place. So there are your glucose molecules flowing through the blood system, and these are then taken up by cells with the help of insulin, and they're converted to ATP, which is the unit of energy that we burn. Now, I did protein last week, and I told you that protein wasn't stored. Carbohydrate is stored. So a certain percentage of it is stored as glycogen. That's where glucose attaches to water. You have 400 gram of that in your muscle. You have 100 gram of it in your liver. So in the first week or two when you're losing weight, well, the first week really, you're losing water and fat because you're dumping your glycogen store, especially on a low carb program. But it's limited. That's it. It's 500 gram, no more. So any extra carb after that is stored as fat. And there is no limit to fat storage. So let's look at the carbohydrate sources of food. First one's very obvious. It's the white stuff and everything that it's added to. Then you have grains. So if you look at 100 gram of wheat, rye or barley, 60% of that is carbohydrate. It's when these grains become processed that you get extra sugar added to the product. Like some breakfast cereals are 87% carb. Then you have fruit. The sugar in it is fructose. Now, that's metabolized differently to glucose. It's metabolized in the liver. So you wouldn't want a really big hit of fructose entering the body because you're putting pressure on the liver to metabolize it. And high fructose is known to raise triglycerides, your dietary fat levels. So fruit, it's your higher sugar fruits like a banana would be 20% carb. And then your lower sugar fruits like your berries, 100 gram of raspberries, are just 5% carb. When you leave a fruit ripen or overripe, that's the sugars breaking down. You can see the black spots on the banana skin there. And that means that that piece of fruit, the sugar from it, will be absorbed quicker. So you've got this big hit of simple sugars hitting the bloodstream, and they'll rise the blood sugars higher. Then you can concentrate fruit sugars like a juice. And you can sit down and eat one orange, but if you were to have a glass of orange juice there, that is about 4 to 5 oranges squeezed into it, and possibly the fibre extracted from it. The fourth one is beans and lentils. So in a tin of beans and lentils, they'll typically be 400 gram. 100 gram of beans is 13 to 17% carb. Fantastic source of fibre. Then you move on to vegetables. The vegetables that grow above the soil are lower in carb. So they're 1 to 5% carb per 100 gram. The veggies that grow below the soil, they collect more starch in them. So they're 6 to 17% carb per 100 gram. Then you move to dairy. Dairy has lactose, which is a naturally occurring sugar in milk and in cheese. Now, again, the more processed that it is, so the little circles of Laughing Cow, they are 6% carb, whereas the likes of a hard cheese would be 0% carb. Then you have alcohol. There's 0% carbohydrate in distilled spirits. The worst are the alco pops and the cocktails because you add sugar and syrup to these drinks. And then you have lager and beer from the grain, and you have wine from the grape. The issue with alcohol is that it tends to make us snacky, so we want to eat more after drink. And then you have the worst culprit, I would say, of all of them are the hidden sugars. It's where you think you're having ketchup or you think you're having a pasta sauce, but there's quite a bit of sugar added to these foods. So check your yogurt labels. Pasta, ketchup, salad dressings is another one. They can add quite a bit of sugar. We spoke about breakfast cereals, fizzy drinks, the concentrated juices. They can also take a fruit like an apricot and dry it out, so you're concentrating the sugar. And then they look really, really small, so you could have 3 of them. Healthy granola bars, you can have a lot of sugar added to that in the form of honey. So be aware of the different type of names that sugar can be called. Dextrose, rice syrup, agave syrup, sugar. They all end up as glucose or fructose in your bloodstream, which have an effect on your blood glucose levels. Now, when you're in the weight loss phase of a low carb program, I will be guiding you to try and get 30 grams of fiber per day into your diet. So what I've found over the last 3 years, looking at men and women lose weight, there is a sweet spot. To hit the 30 grams of fiber, you really need 70 grams of carb per day. That's the sweet spot for weight loss. That means that you keep your bowel healthy, you keep your gut bacteria happy, but you still keep the body low enough in carb so that it will need to use fat in order to get enough energy. Carb tips. So bread is a real trigger food. It's a food that we tend to overeat. So I would advise on buying a sourdough bread when the bread is proving, and it needs to prove, I think, for about 2.5 hours. The bacteria will start to break down the gluten within the bread, making it easier for us to digest the bread, and they will also ferment some of the sugars, reducing the overall carb in the bread. If you buy something like a rye sourdough, it's still lovely when you toast it, but you won't be going back for a second or third slice, so it's less addictive. It makes it less of a trigger food. When it comes to any kind of carbohydrate food, read the labels. So the jars of pasta and that I was talking about earlier. Here's an example of breakfast cereal. Use your phone, take a picture, blow up the picture, and look to see where is the sugar listed on the label. If it's the highest item in the ingredient, has to be listed first. So if sugar is anywhere near the top, you know that it's a top ingredient in the list. So cornflakes, sugar is the 3rd ingredient there. Lizzie's granola, sugar in the form of fructose and black treacle is the 6th and 7th ingredient. Now, you will be eating pasta, rice and noodles again. You may go off them for the weight loss phase, but you will be reintroducing them when you're maintaining your weight. My advice here is weigh them from their dried weight. So 30 to 40 gram dried weight is enough for a woman, 50 to 60 is enough for a man, and that's enough carbohydrate on the plate when you balance it up against the proteins and the veggies. Potato mash is very addictive, I think. It's very moreish, and there's a large serving of it. So I think every now and again maybe a treat, but you're best having potato as a baked potato or boiled, keeping the skin on if it's organic because the fibre is in the skin, and then you can serve a fat or a protein on it, and that will slow the rise in blood sugar because mashed potato tends to cause a rapid rise in blood sugar. Availability is a key reason why many of us gain weight in the first place. You know, the shop is 2 doors down from my house. This food is in the house all the time, and when I'm stressed and when I'm in bad form, I just reach for it. It's there. So it's really not fair. You're not giving yourself a chance to hit your goal weight if you keep this kind of stuff in the cupboard. Because Friday night or Saturday night or that moment in the day, if it's within reach, there will be a moment where it's just the temptation is too great. So try to keep that stuff out of sight, out of mind. Keep it out of the house. It does nobody any favours. And if you're in a supermarket, just make a fast rule. Don't go down the treat aisle. Now, the link between carbohydrate and aging. Well, there's a process called glycation, and that's where you have high blood sugar, high levels of sugar in the blood, and they cause damage. They cause advanced glycated end products. These things cause wrinkles, right? So that's one link with aging. The next one is we now know when glycogen stores are full, any extra carbohydrate that we eat is stored as fat. So it's an overall contributor to the buildup of fats and plaques on our arterial and heart walls. And any BMI over 30, there is a low-grade systemic inflammation throughout the body, and we know that inflammation can trigger disease. And believe it or not, you can have high blood glucose and not know it. It can be silent, so it's worth getting checked. So in summary, I think it's best to have a high fiber carb at breakfast because you're feeding your gut bacteria with the fiber and you're setting yourself up well for the day, and you're most insulin sensitive in the morning. That's aside now from if you're doing intermittent fasting and you're doing a general cleanup. Secondly, if you aim to eat at least 30 grams of fiber, and when you look at your carb on the app, if it's very high, well, then you'll know that there's something wrong with the carbohydrates that you're selecting, because if your carbohydrate is going up high, the fiber should be very high with it. So just review your choice of carbs. And then the last one is, when you lose weight, typically when my clients lose weight, they take up something like running or the gym. They just feel better in themselves, so they become more active. So just remember that carbohydrates are important for muscle recovery. So post an exercise, put in some carb. That's everything that you need to know about carbohydrates. If you have any questions, drop me a WhatsApp or an email. And next up will be fats. Thank you for listening.